You're listening to Tove, a podcast about the good place and Jewish ideas. Hey, everybody. We have a crew of 4 here today, and our particular focus is Kirston Mann, who is costume designer on The Good Place. Hi, Kirston.
Hello.
You want to just tell us where you are right now and what you're doing at the moment?
Right now I'm in Los Angeles and I'm working on a show called Loot with Maya Rudolph, who is our Good Place judge. And it's my 7th project with Maya, who I adore. She's my god that eats burritos. I adore her. And so that's what we're working on. And it's interesting because it's about a woman who's very wealthy and trying to become a better person. If any of you've seen it, yeah,
we're all waving because we all love Maya Rudolph.
You do. I mean, who doesn't?
Who doesn't?
Amazing. And I also live half the year in New York and work in New York as well. So I'm divided between the two of you.
And Jon Spira-Savett, a rabbi working in New Hampshire. The synagogue where I work is called Temple Beth Abraham.
Hi, I'm Sari Laufer. I'm a rabbi in Los Angeles at Stephen Wise Temple. And while I am in Los Angeles full-time, my heart and soul are certainly divided between New York and LA, as New York is the land of my birth and LA the land of my life now.
Hi, Ilana Schachter. I'm thrilled to be here with you. I actually am also divided. I think this is a very interesting mix of people. I am a lifelong New Yorker who took a brief detour and spent 10 years living in Los Angeles. And now I'm back in New York. So my heart is also in both places. I like to say that I'm bi-coastally bilingual. I can chill like a West Coast person, but I can get things done and be a little pushy if I have to, like a New Yorker. But right now, these days, I'm in New York as a rabbi in Roslyn, Long Island.
I have to say that I am a Midwesterner by growing up, and although I have lived in New York, but not in Los Angeles. But I don't think that living in Minnesota is any kind of synthesis between New York and LA at all. Well, we are recording this and we're going to release this just before the Jewish holiday of Purim, which is a festival that is observed by dressing up in costume and performing, which is why Kirston is here. And I just going to say one thing about myself. I was remembering this. The one time I've been on TV and knew I was going to be on TV and seen by a lot of people, I didn't have my own personal kind of wardrobe consultants around when I was getting ready to go, which is my wife, Lori. And so among the many things that happened, I was actually tweeted about by the executive editor of the Daily Beast, who said something about the rabbi's tie is an abomination to the Lord. And so just for the purposes of the Zoom, and I won't put you on the spot to comment, but I wore this gray jacket and this Jimmy V tie, and I don't think it was the perfect choice, but it was.
I don't think it's bad. That's it.
Thank you. You've made my day already. Well, I'll put the tweet and the picture.
Yes.
In the show notes. But no, Kirston. Well, the first thing we ask people new on the podcast is which character on The Good Place you think you're most like right now. So, Kirston, who would you say?
It's very funny. You sent this to me in an email, and I thought all the way up until this very minute, I'll just think, because of course I feel like an amalgam of the characters, and I relate to Eleanor in all her, not necessarily the evolved Eleanor, but the more selfish Eleanor. And I thought a lot about this question because Tahani, I kind of bump against Tahani. She's a person that I don't always find likable. And then I thought to myself, maybe she's the person closest to me. Sometimes the people at a dinner party that are the most annoying to you are the ones that are just slightly different than you are. And so I'm going to stick with Eleanor, but I probably have some Tahani in me, the Los Angeles portion of me.
And do you have a character you wish you were a bit or a lot more like right now?
Disco Janet. I'm going to go with Disco Janet. I love her. I love dressing her. And, I love all Janets. Darcy is so amazing in what she pulled off with the Janet character. So, in my dreams, I'm a Janet. Janet is my mother's name. She'll love that I just said that in my dreams. I'm a Janet.
Oh, that's great. So, we of course want to know your story of how you got involved in the project of The Good Place, and also what particularly is your role, and what do you do in that role as costume designer?
Hmm. Well, I started working with Mike Schur, who's the creator of The Good Place, on Parks and Recreation many years ago. And I adore Mike. This whole podcast could be a love letter to Mike, but I'll try to hold back.
No, that's fine.
And we did Parks and Recreation, we did Brooklyn Nine-Nine, and then came along The Good Place. And The Good Place has been special since the start. We had a specific number that we wanted to do. He never wanted to go on and on. Usually when you're working on a show, you want to do 150 episodes. Your dream is that the network keeps picking you up. But they would have continued on with The Good Place, but he had a specific stopping point and a vision. And I wonder what he would say, but I feel like he's the opposite of Chidi. He's such a decisive, kind-hearted person. Not that Chidi is not kind-hearted, but Mike is very decisive and great to work with. That's the best kind of showrunner you can have. The thing I also love about working with him is that in every script that he writes, you can always tell when he's written something because you laugh and you cry. I always get choked up when I read something that Mike has written.
So tell us about your line of work. And
and also I'm a costume designer. Mike cares about me. I never want to talk about clothes. No, I'm the costume designer. So I get to try to talk. I love to tell the story through clothes, and that's what I get to do for my life. And so I get to work closely with the actors, doing fittings. And in the initial fittings of any show, you're talking about character, and you're trying to get to a place where the actor feels like the character. And that's the miracle of being in a fitting room with the actor. And I feel like I have the best job in the world because I get to be part of the storytelling in an artistic way, in a colorful way, I'll say, and trying to help people feel in their bodies and in the direction of where they need to go with their character.
I have a question about that. I've been thinking about this holiday Purim where we dress up in costume. And one of the big themes of Purim is, I think, this juxtaposition between the ability for a costume to hide our identities and the ability for us to reveal who we are. And I'm just thinking about what you just said, just reminded me so much of this juxtaposition, because I feel like as a costume designer, you have the role of finding costumes that actually don't feel like costumes that align with the character, or that elevate the character's truest self. So I'm just wondering if you could speak a little bit about the role of costume in terms of bringing out one's identity, one's character's identity, versus how we might think about the word costume as the opposite.
Right. That's so interesting, because I feel that we are all wearing costumes, right? We're all always wearing costumes. And I do a lot of shows where this would be a costume. In fact, probably Kristen Bell probably wore this sweater, something like this sweater. But, we're always wearing costumes, and we're occasionally we put on our confident outfit, or our outfit where we don't want to be seen. So clothing is always costume to me. And how people want to be seen in the world is so interesting always. If you're playing somebody else, like Ted Danson is playing somebody other than Ted, when he's playing Michael and we're in the fitting room, he needs to feel like, who is this guy? Who is this guy? And there's actors that say that they work from the inside out and some that work from the outside in, which is kind of an interesting thought. If you put on the clothes and you all of a sudden feel like, I'm a powerful person, I'm a godlike creature, I'm an angel, I'm whatever I am, or you can really start to work inside and kind of then see how you want to be seen by your outer person. And I work with all actors that go both ways, but I guess, I don't know if I'm answering your question. I do think we're all always wearing a costume and how we want to present ourselves. So your costume at Purim is just, it's fun because you get to stand outside yourself, but is it saying something about you in addition to, your daily wear?
I'm going to jump in because Ilana stole my question. Though I want to actually play off on the Purim thing again, right? One of the language, there's a lot about like hiddenness and revealed. And I'm curious, I was like trying to go through like a mental Rolodex in my head, but were there ever times on the show where you specifically dressed a character really differently than they would normally be, sort of in an attempt to reshape their character in some way or another? Like, I feel like a lot of the work I would imagine that you do on any show, but I feel like especially on a show like this is to like dress, like when I think about Tahani, especially because hers are, like it was to, portray this particular, I like the LA comment. I agree. Right. But, were there ever times where you were either tempted or did dress in such a way to like, again, I think it's what Ilana said, like both hide aspects of who they are, but also elevate other aspects, like let us see different parts of them.
Right. I mean, I think the obvious person is Jason, who we're putting in monk's robes. And he was probably the character that we could go the furthest with, because he's got his Florida gear, he's got his good place gear, he's got his monk's robes, and he's really hiding. He's not speaking. And all we have is that costume to think initially, especially, that he is a monk, and if he wasn't wearing that and he was just a guy in a tracksuit not speaking, we might feel differently about him. But because he's wearing that specific costume, we excuse that behavior, and he is really able to hide. So that's the one that just spells it out the most. But and Eleanor was a little more subtle. She would never have worn the good place clothes in Arizona. And, we're dressing her like the good Eleanor. And I'm saying that in air quotes for people that are listening, so that she's wearing plaid shirts and she's wearing clogs and she's a little more down to earth. At least that's what we're trying to show. And
she has like a real Studio City farmers market vibe going on.
Right? Yeah, she's got definitely farmers market, which I have to say, I've also worked with Kirston a lot and I adore her. And there's certain people that just mainly, and I'll include Maya in this as well, want to be comfortable. And so she probably leans more towards farmers market, good Eleanor, in her real life. And so she's very easygoing person. And anyway, so subtly we tried to show it with Eleanor. Jason's a bit easier, cheaty, just to go a little more professorial. And I think that he bought it. And it is interesting when you're doing costumes that people, especially when you're working with Mike, people sort of become the character in their real lives. And he's also taking from real life to exaggerate their characters. And there's often little digs in any kind of direction, who the person actually is,
I was thinking about that the good place is by its nature kind of an exaggerated, like a parable when it's just in the neighborhood, especially initially. And it's funny because I'm not a visual person at all. It took me a long time to sort of figure out that I was responding to, kind of the color scheme and everything of the sets and the yogurt places and all that. But I wondered if does that make it sort of easier or harder? I would think comedy generally maybe is a little more exaggerated, but first these people are set up as kind of types that could be summed up in a word, and then they get more sophisticated. Does that make it easier or harder to dress them?
When they are types, it's very easy. And I mean, you hope that people are broader than their types. And we were able to do that throughout the season, but you want to be able to tell a story very quickly. So Arizona Eleanor is a very specific look. And I don't know that everybody can see that. I can see that Sari sees it. But so we want to be able to tell a quick part of the story with the costume when you first see her that you get like, oh, this is a different person than the person that we're seeing in The Good Place. And so I think that is part of my job, is to give a quick wink to, we're trying to move this character along. Did that answer your question?
Yeah.
And we're hoping to be subtle. And I will say, working with Mike, he never wants it to be about the costume. He wants it. I think he wants everything to be subtle so that you get it if you get it. And if not, you're moving along with the story. And so I never try to make the costume bigger than the story on anything I work on, I hope.
So I have a question. John knows this, Ilana, you may not, but that I think Mindy is like, I cannot get enough of Mindy, and I cannot get enough of The Medium Place. I literally cannot get enough. And I'm sure, and I think I know the answer, but I mean, she's so perfect, right? I grew up in New York City in the 80s and 90s. So I'm like, yes, the shoulder pads, the sneaker, like the whole thing.
Yeah.
But she's also sort of the one character who never bear, right? Like that's always, and so I don't know if this is a question or a comment, but like, as you were talking about sort of Eleanor's style, like I think it's subtle, but there is that difference of, as she sort of like, it feels like she owns herself as the quote unquote good Eleanor, like she's more comfortable dressing that way. And also like kind of like leaning a little, I feel like, to the cheesy aesthetic, like sweaters and things like that, and Mindy sort of stays in that same place. And I'm curious, like, was that part of the conversation of like, that's part of it, right? Is she is in the same place and others are not.
Right. And Mindy never really changes. I mean, she gets Derek for a second.
I know.
She gets some wind chime action. She doesn't really change. And so we don't want to change her. And I love her too. I almost picked her as my person because she's just so herself. There's nothing that she's trying to be or not be. And yeah, goals. I mean, maybe not to do cocaine and maybe, but she's very comfortable with everything that she's set up there. Her naked gardening and her, her whole life there. And she's not interested in spending time with any of them. And yeah, there's something amazing about her. I'm also obsessed. And anytime we got to, we drove up to Disney Ranch to shoot those scenes. And anytime we got to do it, I was so excited.
There was, I think, a couple moments that really struck me in the series around Eleanor, who I would have thought was the one who had the most variety of costume. And I was thinking about when she has her first return to Earth, where she doesn't get killed by the grocery cart incident. And she's had that distinctive Arizona look. And then as she starts to drift into that year of doing good stuff, she looks a lot different. And I really appreciated how that look sort of helped tell the story. And I was amazed when I watched it again, how efficiently, how compact you guys were in being able to illuminate that transformation and then her disillusionment sort of around that when she eventually gets to the bar at the end of that. And the other thing about the Eleanor that struck me was when I guess it's at the beginning of this season 4, when she's left in charge by Michael, and in those opening episodes when she's trying to dress the part of the boss. And I think, if I'm right, that what she wears kind of changes over the course of that. And I totally relate to that. I mean, for a long time early in my career, I was, necktie all the time. I needed every possible piece of authority I could muster. I was teaching kids, high school kids, and I did not believe that they would buy me as the character that I was trying to be. But was that, did I get that? Am I observing something intended there?
Yeah. I'm so impressed by your observation, actually, because I do think she has subtle movement, but it's definite movement. And now I'm going to be a little sexist. I'm so impressed that a man noticed, and it makes me so happy.
I'm sorry, can I just interject? Because I was responsible for my middle child, my first girl, when she was a toddler, and I was the parent at home, and every day my wife would say, like, you went out in that, you let her go out in that, to the point that I was dressing her just in black pants and a pink shirt, like, every day. That's all I could. So I'm pretty impressed.
Yeah, so your observations are correct. And when she goes back and then she travels to Australia, if you remember, she traveled to meet Chidi. And then I wanted to dress her a little more collegiate. So she's a college student, or she's trying to be, and so that's that shift. And I thought it was a pretty subtle shift, but I'm so glad you noticed that we were really trying to do that and take her out of her Arizona garb and, make her a little bit more serious. And then as the seasons progress and she becomes an architect, we definitely put sweaters on her with little shirts underneath and tried to make her look a little more professional, that she was taking the job seriously. And so she could be taken more seriously by the people that are coming into the good place. And I'm very happy you noticed. Thank you.
I'm trying to decide what my question about Tahani is. I also love Tahani. I think my question, in some ways, I guess she's sort of the character also whose clothing changed the least, right? I'm trying to think if we ever sort of saw her out of like Tahani. But I am also curious, I know that Jamila is such an activist for, body positivity and like, all sizes, and yet I think is portrayed as sort of the most like girly and superficial of all of them. And I'm curious, like, was that a conversation with her, or is she just like consummate actress who's like, yep, put it on me and I will go out there in it?
That's funny because actually Jamila dresses a lot like Tahani, and we took
good for her.
Yes, I'm sure she is for body positivity and that everybody should do what they want to do. But she, in her personal, we took a lot of, and I said this in the Good Place podcast, she wheeled in a suitcase on our first fitting. And we tried her own dresses on her for silhouettes because she knows what looks good on her. She's very aware. And we patterned a lot of her personal things. So she probably dresses the most like herself in real life as well. And she is a very feminine, beautiful woman. And she knows what looks good on her. And we didn't move that needle too much. And in a weird way, it's so funny when I just was rewatching and that she dies in that private jet, like how far did they move? When they do the funerals to end all funerals and she's in her private jet and everybody goes back to who they were. But I don't know how much she left it. She became kinder, but she was still who she was at the core.
I'm reminded of the episode where she tries to wear cargo pants for her soulmate.
Yeah.
I was just rewatching that yesterday, and it's just such the discomfort that she holds during that episode. And I think, I don't know, that the tension, she keeps alluding to the fact that that outfit is very comfortable, but it's also so disconcerting to her. I really appreciated what you did there in that episode.
Thank you. That's very funny. Jamila herself is not comfortable in cargo pants, and we did get to put them on her a few times. And the sweatpants she wears also at Eleanor's funeral. But yeah, she doesn't wear pants a lot. That's a woman who wears a dress and wears it well.
Cargo pants are an ongoing joke in our house as well. So
they are. What's the joke?
My husband loves them. He thinks they're like the greatest utilitarian. And I'm like, they're done. Like we don't wear cargo pants. And what's funny is I don't remember who the designer, they just did a collab with Target, and I bought a pair of pants, and I'm like, I'm taking them out of package. And my husband's like, do you know what those are? And I was like, they're so cute. They have a pocket here. And he's like, they're cargo pants.
I don't think anyone else in the show wears cargo pants.
No, but I feel like Jason would.
Cargo pants, though.
Jason would, though. I feel like that would be in.
Jason would. Yeah, he might have. Some Pillboy might have.
Yeah.
Yeah. Donkey Dog.
When you found out that you were going to get to like go to Earth in season 3, was that, or, I mean, you had the flashbacks, which were always took place, but that you would have like whole episodes. Was that a big deal? Was that like, oh, fun, we get to do something totally different here?
I mean, going to Earth feels more like every other show. Making The Good Place was probably the biggest, the most fun to try to make a little bit of a fantasy world. But going to Earth, I mean, I have to say, everything was fun on the show. It was a really great show. A lot of us had worked together for many years. Most of us came from Parks and Rec, and there's a lot of good people for real on that show. So going to Earth was fun, but making The Good Place and making The Bad Place and doing those, I mean, The Bad Place is particularly fun. That was great. Doing those characters, doing the Janets and the bad Janets, that's more exciting for me.
I've been thinking about the Janet from a couple point of view, but as you say, all the Janets. And then, I'm just fascinated by the Janets episode where it was the void and the only thing that differentiated people was what they were wearing. And I guess the idea of Janet herself as someone who's not really supposed to be a person with a personality, and which I guess is making me, maybe that's part of a question about whether the unique concept of the show is being about ethical ideas or things like that. Did that cause you to think about either that character or just like how you approach this differently than you would on a show that's set in a police station or a city government department?
I need you to read.
Yeah, I definitely need to. All right, I'll break that into 2 pieces. So one is Janet as a kid, like how do you approach someone who, like, she could look so many different ways, and also she wasn't, did you think of her, okay, that like the show calls her not a girl, but basically she's a character, so I'll treat her like a character, but or was it, or do you approach that differently because she's a different kind of character?
So I've told this story before, but when I read the script, I thought of when I was a kid. I used to fly alone occasionally in the 70s, and the stewardesses always, and they were called stewardesses then, so always, I felt very taken care of them, and they felt like these mythological creatures, and that's what they wore. And so right when I read it, I felt like, oh, Janet is like a 1970s stewardess. With the shirt and the skirt and the vest and the whole thing. And I remember they used to let me hand out mints. And when I said it to Mike, he was completely down with it. And then Darcy was game. And that was that. Literally in the fitting, we were kind of organizing how we were going to create this costume. And then we're able to make many, in the chapter where there are all the Janets, almost all of them are wearing that. When in the scene where we're in the blue and yellow chevron outfits, she's wearing that. She's always wearing that. She's always my air hostess in the sky. And it helps that they didn't feel like real people to me at that point. And then it's so lovely that Janet becomes more and more human. And I do think Mike sometimes predicts the future. I don't know if any of you read that article in the New York Times where the Bing bot was saying, "I love you" to the reporter. Did anybody read that? And I felt like, oh, it's like Janet, because she kept getting more and more human until she was madly in love with Jason, and it held on to that love throughout the whole thing.
Yeah. So the other part of my question, I guess, was when the show talks about these conceptual things so explicitly, good and evil, or right and wrong, does that change things? On the official podcast, you talked about something related to green being the color of the Good Place color and breaking it into its pieces of blue and yellow for something. Did you do your job differently because of the nature of the show?
Well, I loved that there were rules in the show, and we had rules to follow, and a color rule. And I love color. And I loved how I was able to think about it in regards to this show, and that he very specifically that green was good and red was bad. That helped me a lot. And as I said in the official one, when he said blue and yellow, that because they were the colors of the University of Michigan, he wanted all the chevron stripes when we do that first episode. And I needed to make sense of why that worked also. And as you all know, yellow and blue equal green, and that it's the tearing apart of the good place colors. And so Mike gave me parameters, and I like to think of things in color. If that purple is the shadow for yellow, I am always thinking how things make sense to me in the color wheel. I don't know if you know that. If you take a primary color and you combine the other two colors, that makes the shadow of that color.
You guys are like you're nodding and stuff without.
Because I learned it in art. Yeah. I remember learning that in art. Now that you said it, I don't know that I would have thought about it.
John's like taking notes right now for his next TV interview.
Oh, I thought for his next sermon.
Use the color wheel for
don't
his
put
tie.
I will say I was on Jeopardy. That's my big television appearance in life. And they send you an email that actually gives clothing suggestions. So like
that's what I thought you were going to say. John's taking notes for the next time he has to dress his daughter.
Yeah.
Oh, or that. Yeah.
I don't have to do that anymore.
Or for his next sermon. It's going to be all about the color wheel.
I'm thinking partly that in a way we do this black box thing as congregational rabbis. Like I don't dress the part of what I'm going to talk about, or what the Torah reading is about. That's occasionally. Now I'm thinking about occasionally I do say that I picked a certain tie because I'm going to say this has to do with that dimension. But I don't have that many ties, so I make them all about whatever. But I'm thinking about story. I'm just. It's so cool to do storytelling with those tools and with those visual tools, because a lot of the storytelling I get to do, I don't have access to that, or I don't have the time. I think if I thought about it, maybe I would try to create that visual to aid what I was talking about.
Right. Not everybody has a costume person in their back.
I would love to. That'd be a dream come true. I was also, again, this is more of a comment than a question. One of this past week we read in the cycle of the Torah readings, the order that we read them, was this portion Tzaveh, which is all about costumes. Actually, it's about what the high priests had to wear, and I wrote about it in rabbinic school, so it was my senior sermon. So I've always been attracted to the portion, and I like clothing. And
can we put that in the show notes there, Sari? Have you got it?
My senior sermon?
Yeah. No.
If I can find it, yes. I just don't know that I can find it, because it was back in the days of floppy disks. So, but what I was going to say, and I think is actually really interesting based on Kirston, some of the things you were saying about the characters, right? I think what is so maybe, and Michael aside, because as you said, at the beginning, they are not presented as people, but the others, the foursome, I love knowing that actually parts of them are really part of the costume, right? So in the Torah portion, it really is the priests put on this costume almost as armor. It's I'm going to put this on, and once I put it on, I know what to do and how to behave. And I sort of love this idea that for both the characters and for the actors, there wasn't that sort of suiting up in armor, that it was this reminder of actually, I'm going to wear things that are maybe how I dress in maybe less for Jason, but for the others, maybe a little bit how I dress in the world. And so not having that, I put this thing on and then I become this other figure. And so I'm intrigued by that. And I think Brooklyn Nine-Nine being opposite, right? Where they, they're going to put on a police uniform and then they become this person that they might not be in life. So it's not really a question, but I'm intrigued by that.
Right. Except that Andy in Brooklyn Nine-Nine is wearing a leather jacket and flannel shirts, mostly with jeans. And
also I love Andy Samberg. I just would like that.
Yeah. Oh yes. I love him too.
Yeah.
He definitely was wearing what he likes to wear, including his sneakers. And sometimes he'd wear his pants home and then just wear them the next morning. His bottom half was often just getting in the car with him at the end of the scene. So I do feel my goal, and especially in television where a lot of things are close up, the most important thing is people's faces and expressions. And I say this to everybody, never wear uncomfortable shoes because it makes your face look bad. And people are looking at your face and maybe they look at your feet for a second, but so be comfortable so that you can do what you need to do. I mean, that's my advice for anyone in life. I mean, but that's coming from somebody who never wanted to wear a prom dress. So, and I don't really want to, being a costume designer, some people expect you to dress a certain way. And I feel like I dress a way that makes me efficient in my work. Although I do find that as I'm doing a show, I start to dress like the main character.
Oh,
because I can't help myself. I'm thinking of them. And then you're slowly just becoming, I probably dressed a lot more like Eleanor as we were doing the good. And sometimes Kirston would say, what are those pants you're wearing? I want to wear them on the show. And then we had a lot of closet exchanges. Yeah.
This is totally off topic, but I'm just wondering if you could pick one thing from Maya Rudolph's loot wardrobe that has entered into your wardrobe now. What would it be?
Oh, that's such a good, so oh gosh.
Because I mean,
I
those
love
clothes
it all. I don't think
I love what she's wearing. But I'm not sure I'm brave enough.
I feel the same way. I feel like, could I pull off something from Maya's closet? I mean, wow, that's a good question. I look through that stuff all the time and I feel like, what could I love all those brightly colored things with matching, pants. And I like all her matching looks. And I wish I could pull those off. And the other day, because we're in the process of shooting, Maya was wearing the wackiest outfit. And I was like, I want to wear that. And she's like, take it home. It's like high orange flowered boots with an orange dress. And I didn't take it home, but in my dreams, I could pull an outfit like that off. Yes. So she's very fun to dress, and Loot is fun for that reason. Thank you for watching it. That's nice. I am interested what you think about that. Maybe that's the next podcast you all do, is how this person is becoming a better person. Is she?
That's cool. I've just started to watch. I'm way behind.
And I love that. I love her as the judge in The Good Place. She's probably also one of my very favorite characters. It's so silly. And it is so fun to think that the judge of us all might be fishing through her purse and finding 10 lipsticks and a DVD and not finding the button to demolish us all. She's pretty incredible. I have a question.
Yeah, go for it.
You might want to cut out too, but I'm so curious. Okay, I am familiar with a little bit with the book of Esther, and I'm always been curious. Can I ask, do you think Esther would go to the good place? I know.
Wow.
I am curious, and I thought, I get to ask some rabbis, because a lot of people, it's almost like Minority Report. A lot of people died.
I want to know why you think she wouldn't go. Like, what are some things on the list that you would kind of put in the?
You just said, because we massacred like 100,000 people at the end of the story.
I know what I would answer, Sari. I was asking somebody else.
Wait, but I missed what Sari said. So
no, I was repeating what you said. You said like a lot of people died.
A lot of people died, and I think about it, and I love Purim. It's such a fun holiday. But okay, so I get wanting to kill Haman, but after that, then all of his family is murdered. And I can tell you from being from a big family myself, we're not all on the same page about anything. So it didn't feel like anyone got any kind of trial. And then after that, I think 500 and then 300 and so on and so on. A lot of people were killed. The innocent people get killed in the killing of the people that wanted to kill the Jewish people.
And are you putting that at Esther's feet there, Kirston?
I'm curious between Esther and Mordecai, because they actually got to make the rule. And I've always been curious, and since you wrote that we were talking about this, I thought, I have a chance to ask some rabbis.
It's such a good question. I would have never thought about that question. I like just
But I love it.
You reframed the Book of Esther for me in a profound way, and I am sitting with it right now. I want to say that I think that I'm not going to commit to a final answer right now, but one thing that I am thinking about is the way in which Esther's character is able to develop and improve and grow through the story. I think about Eleanor as an interesting parallel there. Esther starts out not as a bad person, but as a really passive person. She's an object of the story, and then there's a turning point where she becomes activated. And I think that in that moment, she steps into a place of power and tries to do what is right for her people. And so I want to give her points for that. I don't know if at the end of her life, if we added up all the good points and the bad points, where we would tally, whether we'd be in the green or the red. I'm not sure, but I do feel like that moment has a lot of weight, a lot of ethical weight, that she stepped up and acted on behalf of her people for their sake, right? For others. She stepped up and was a voice for others.
I love that. And it's up to a certain point. Like, I do feel like, Haman's death makes total sense to me. And after that, I feel like as people are, it gets a little dark.
I was just teaching on it actually with a group of adult learners, and this is totally not an answer to your question, but it is sort of in a response to the show The Good Place, that a lot of people read the Book of Esther as like farce or satire. And we were talking about the movie Inglourious Basterds. Is the end of the Book of Esther, is it just sort of the revenge fantasy come true? Like, is it actually meant to be almost a comedy scene of like, in like even like the first episode of The Good Place, right? Like just like chaos and things flying everywhere, and right, like again, it does not answer your question about Esther, though I do actually really love that question. And if I were giving a sermon Friday night, that would perhaps be my sermon. So one of you, but I do want to just name that, like, I think I don't know if I don't love Purim actually as a holiday, but I don't know if there's a redemptive way of reading the end of that book that is a little less violent, more vengeance, if that makes sense.
I love that answer, because then it makes me feel like if it is sort of a farce, then it makes people more afraid to go up against, if it is like, you better watch out because we will smash you. That I love.
I'll say a couple things. One is, I think that I've come to understand Esther more and more as someone who was literally and fairly brutally, I think it's fair to say, forced to dress up in a certain way. In the second chapter, where she's in this 12-month disappearance into makeup and costume, is so horrifying and so different than the beauty contest that many of us were taught about in Hebrew school. And to have to emerge out of that and figure out how to wear this crown, I guess, is really interesting to me. And I've been thinking a lot about, I guess, a couple of things. Somebody actually was coming in today to talk to me, exploring about Judaism and talking about how all religions have this male energy, negative, male patriarchal thing that the old religions have. And it was very interesting because Ilana and I and Daniela a year ago were talking with, I think, maybe our different gendered perspectives about Purim, and actually about the episode that I'm going to want to ask you about if you've got a minute to also. So maybe I think about this differently, but it made me focus on something. And maybe the way you're asking the question too, Kirston, is that I might think, if I wanted to give Esther more points, to attribute something to her at the end, which was that when she and Mordecai declare, okay, this is how we're going to celebrate in the future. Yes, we're going to read this story, and also we're going to have these other customs of Mishloach Manot, we're going to feed each other sweets, and Tanot Le'Avyonim, we're going to look out for people who are vulnerable. And I very much would want to read that as somebody's contribution, maybe Esther's, to, yeah, that was out of control, and maybe that had to happen. Maybe it didn't have to happen. Maybe we need to atone for that happening. But I want to grab hold of this thing again and make it better, because there are parts of it we need to hold on to and remember. So that's how I would at least give her points. I never thought to attribute to Esther the carnage. I just naturally would go to it. either it being unfortunately out of control, or I thought of Mordecai, I guess.
Yeah. And maybe it isn't her, I mean, because up to that point, it feels like she's so brave going and facing the king. And like we were talking about costumes, she's hiding her identity and she's doing, but then as it starts to roll with the deaths, and it feels, so these answers were helpful. Thank you.
Now, everybody and listeners too should think about this from all these points of view. I wanted to ask you, Kirston, about a particular episode, Rhonda, Diana, Jake, and Trent, the one where our characters, who obviously are actors in costume, have to wear costumes to get through the bad place headquarters to get to the portal to the judge. And I was just curious if there's any story to that, either conceiving of that episode, or did you have anything to do with sort of that plot twist, or was that kind of a cool challenge to have to address there?
With them switching into with Janet handing off their costumes of how they were going to fit into a certain place. I'm sure that was written in, and we all were very excited about it because it's just fun to get them out of their characters and into something else, and then to see them, the animatronic versions of themselves in front of us was also very fun. That whole episode was great for a costume department because we were dressing all those people who had committed those crimes, flossing in the office, or the men that were saying things that I can't remember a lot. Has anybody watched it recently? They were saying things that, were inappropriate to women or whatever. And dressing up and pretending that you are somebody else and then acting bad, and who was good at it and who was bad at it. And how it's funny because once again, I'm talking about Manny, who plays Jason. He never leaves, aside from being a monk and being silent, he never leaves himself behind. He's always going to throw a Molotov cocktail, so he's not, I guess only influenced by his monk robes. He's himself. He can't help himself, that his purity. And that's what's so great about him. He's pure Jason. So it was great to do. And I have to say, all the actors had a lot of fun doing it. And Chidi saying that the way to torture. And I don't know if you know that it was Dax Shepard, Kristen's husband, who is the demon who tries to get Chidi to talk. Did you know that? That's Dax Shepard. And he makes a little flirty move on Kristen at the end, just a little wink. The demon who tries to get Chidi to come over and talk to and tell the others how you could torture somebody. That's Dax. We loved having him on the show. And of course, Kristen did too.
Cool. I am curious whether you have any sort of version of the occupational hazard that maybe the three rabbis have, which is that things that we read or things that we encounter, like there's always that sort of sermon meter on. I shouldn't speak for Sari and Ilana, whether that's true. But I know, for me, like you mentioned that you sort of take on sometimes the wardrobe of things that you're doing, but do you have this, like, are your eyes always popping at the way you're seeing people dress or situations like that?
Oh, when I see people out in public, is that you?
Yeah, just like when you're wandering and just in your life.
Oh, completely. I used to keep, photo albums of just people on the street. And I think it's fun going back and forth between New York and LA and looking at the difference. One of the lines in the show, the woman in their $400 yoga pants and not vaccinating their children, there are these stereotypes on both sides. And I do love watching people and their clothes and how they're presenting themselves. And it's endlessly fun for me. And I don't think I'll ever get tired of it, which makes me feel like I made the right career choice.
Anything else you want to ask us?
Oh my gosh, I wish I could just take a long walk with each of you and talk about life. Listening to the show.
Like, you name it. I'm not far from you.
You're not far from me, and then I'll be in New York.
You definitely want to walk with these people, yeah.
No problem. I'm available. I will make myself available.
Would you really? Yeah. I have so many questions, so many life questions, and I love listening to you all. It's such an honor to be here, and so many life questions about you, the way that you are always questioning what's going on in life, and how you related it to this show it's very moving, very moving.
Thank you. I was not fishing for that, but wondering if you had anything related to the show or Purim that wanted to bounce off us more, like your
Maybe what are you all doing for Purim?
In my house, and I'm sure this is true in Sari's house as well, we have little kids. So, right now we're in a cold panic in my house because we have not fully put together the costume plan.
Mhm.
So every night now, there are very active debates. There are lists, like these are the options, and everybody has to wait for their preferred costume.
Sounds like a Hollywood writer's room.
My kids' options are you wear what you wore for Halloween, or you find something else that's already in the house. We don't buy new costumes for Purim. That's my rule. And speaking of comfort with yourself, I have just decided to really lean into the adult onesie. So every year I just buy a new animal or whatever. So I'm going to be a Care Bear for our Purim carnival because it's like a candy theme. And then on Purim itself, I just bought myself a sloth costume and I'm pretty excited about it.
Oh, wow. I don't know if you know that Kristen Bell's favorite animal.
I do actually know that. I do actually know that.
It's funny because I was going to say, for an idea, just dress everyone like the Good Place.
Yes, that would actually be super fun.
Or a family.
Maybe one year we will do that, actually.
Oh, wow.
I've made so many Janet costumes, including for Maya's daughter, Pearl.
That's awesome.
We could have a little Janet costume factory back in the day.
John, what's happening by you?
I don't know. So I've got these two sets of thoughts because I was mentioning before, and I think this is something, Kirston, you asked us a while ago. So the year that I was my first year out and teaching high school kids and trying to be rabbi in as formal as possible, I definitely came as sort of bad Janet. I wore, I don't know, what when I was growing up were called burnouts, with my ripped jeans and my T-shirt with the skull and, my sort of heavy metal version with the cigarette thing.
I need a photo.
My sleeve. Yeah, and it took me a little bit of guts, I think, myself to do it. And the kids were like, it had the effect, I guess, it would have, which was that, who is that? I put the makeup on, bleached my face, whatever you call that, too. But now I'm more in the situation where my intended audience are children. So last year I was Bruno. It's hard to believe that was a whole year ago in Kanto. And just trying to think of something that's in their life and enchant them a little bit. But I so much like the shadow side kind of bad rabbi idea.
I'll just share one really quick Purim story because I'm reminded of what you said, Kirston, at the beginning about how we're always wearing costumes, like what we choose to wear is how we want to portray ourselves. And last year I dressed up as kind of like an 80s punk rocker, kind of like a Joan Jett vibe, and so I wore these stiletto boots with tight neon colored leggings. And I had, before the children's Megillah reading, before our service in the sanctuary where I was going to wear this costume, I had a meeting with a bar mitzvah family. And so I was in full costume with the bar mitzvah family. And I had, I have curly hair. So I just kind of teased out my hair. It was really big and puffy. And I wore eyeliner, which you don't know me, but I don't usually wear makeup. And at a certain point in the conversation, I said to the family, I'm sorry about my outfit. I'm just on my way to the service. And the father of the bar mitzvah said, oh, I just thought that was the way you dressed. And I was like, no, this is not.
Did you keep in touch with that family, and did they ever laugh about it with you later?
Yes, I know the family very well. We haven't revisited that comment, but it was a precious moment for me.
Oh my God.
That's very funny. I once, do you remember Carol Burnett from the TV show? In college, a guy invited me to a Halloween party, and I dressed as Mama, and I put a pillow in my butt, and I had a gray short wig, and I loved my costume so much. I was so excited to go to his party, and I knock on the door, and he's dressed like George of the Jungle or something. He's wearing like a loincloth, and he didn't know who I was, which also excited me. And then all the other girls were dressed as Robert Palmer girls. And we never went out again.
I guess we should wind down. I always feel awkward. Like, should I ask someone, are you Jewish, or say you're not Jewish, this being a Jewish podcast?
I'm not Jewish. I landed in Israel like I was on my way from Greece to Egypt when I was young and backpacking. And then I never left Israel, and I fell in love with Israel, and I stayed there for a year, and I moved with our Garim from Kibbutz Evron down to Kerem Shalom. And I felt, I had a very strange, beautiful experience there. I was constantly having like a deja vu. I felt very at home, and I felt like I knew where things were. I just felt very at home. And I thought, I was only 19. I came home to finish college, and I didn't go back. But during that year, I thought that's how I wanted to live my life. I thought I wanted to live on a kibbutz. I thought I wanted to live very simply, and, life happens. But I have such a heart feeling for that place, and for the people that lived on the kibbutz, and how kind they were to me, and was a big part of my life.
Oh.
Mm-hmm.
That is so interesting. I should emphasize for the listeners that, again, the podcast is not at all attempting to sell Judaism or anything like that. It's just an interesting life point.
No, it is. But it actually made me want to do, I was so excited. I was thinking, rabbis want to talk to me. I want to talk to you. So I got so excited when I read your email.
Mm. Is there anyone from early in your life that you would want to give a shout out to as someone who got you thinking particularly about ethics or ethical philosophy long before you worked on The Good Place?
So I've listened to you ask this question, and one of my college professors, Jerry Farber, I'd say he inspired me. I mean, he's a literature professor who I took many classes with and liked him very much. And he got me thinking about all kinds of things more than philosophy. And then I will say, I'm going to say my son made me look at life differently. And throughout the years, in all sorts of ways, such a kaleidoscope of ways, and helps me think about life and look at life. And so my shout out is to Charlie Sands, my son.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's great all to talk together. Kirston Mann, thank you for
I know, I love this.
doing this.
So fun. Thank you so much. I'm really honored.
Oh, we are too. Sari,
this was a
Ilana,
treat.
thank you. Great to be all together.
Thank you so much. This was so much fun.
I look forward to our walks.
Yeah, anytime.
Yeah.
Happening.
I'll let you get through Purim.
All right. After that, though, all good. Also, when it warms up here, it's very cold here, everyone.
Yes, it is cold here. It feels like the East Coast.
New Hampshire is lovely too.
I bet.
Well, that is another special episode of Tove. Thank you for listening. If you enjoy the podcast or get something out of it, you can give us a good rating or a review and tell other people about Tove, however you do that. We'd love to hear questions and ideas. You can email any or all of us at tove@tovegoodplace.com, or you can connect with us through Facebook or other social media at Tove Good Place. We've got a website, tovegoodplace.com, with show notes for each episode and general links to Jewish things or concepts we talk about on the podcast, like Purim and the Megillah, the Book of Esther. Kirston Mann has a website, kirston.com. That's Kirston. Sari Laufer tweets at Rabbi Laufer. Ilana Schachter is on Instagram at FOR_RILS. I'm Jon Spira-Savett at RabbiJS3 and also rabbijon.net. If you're getting ready to celebrate Purim, happy Purim, Simchat Purim. And if you're looking for a place where you live or online to celebrate, go to the host page on tovegoodplace.com and learn how to join any of us, or get in touch by email and we'll help you out. We all really appreciate your listening and making time for our conversations in your time. And to adapt the sign-off that Mark Evan Jackson, who plays Sean, uses in the official Good Place podcast, now go learn more about something good.
Bum, 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 bum.